was 2014. High school graduation was upon me, and soon everyone I had gone to school with for most of my life would be moving away from each other to attend different colleges across the country. Friends I had known since the early days of elementary school, all heading off to pursue their own unique interests and fields of study. It was truly a strange time because after graduation, our lives really would change forever. As an only child, my favorite pastime when I wasn't doing homework or hanging out with friends was playing video games. It was sometime in the early 2000s when I received The Legend of Zelda: Wind Waker and The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time Master Quest. I had played as Link and Zelda in Super Smash Bros. And liked the characters so much that my mom got me both games. I was immediately enamored by what seemed to be an infinite world, in both games, that was inside of my TV. It took me a few years to beat both the games, as I wasn't very good at puzzles and would easily get scared in places like the Shadow Temple and the areas of the Great Sea where the big octos lived, but I felt so accomplished once I finally reached the endings. I can't even tell you how many hours were spent exploring the vast worlds of Hyrule and the Great Sea, and how my big imagination would create my own adventures for Link, as I would sometimes narrate his thoughts and other characters speaking to him as I played through my imaginary quests that I created in my head. The story of Ocarina of Time was especially significant to me, with how long it felt having to play as Link in childhood as well as adulthood. It really felt like an epic journey, almost as if you were with Link throughout the game, aiding him on his quest to save Hyrule and defeat Ganondorf. However, it wouldn't be until many years later when I realized just how much the game impacted me, and how I never actually got to play the sequel. Hearing about it as a child, I always dreamed of playing Ocarina's sequel, Majora's Mask. But as time went on and I went through life, I had forgotten Majora's Mask even existed. Let's go back to 2014. It had been a while since I last played Ocarina of Time. In fact, I wasn't really interested in video games as much as I used to be. And any time I did play something, it was a casual life sim. My mind had moved on to other things I found more stimulating at the time: music, creative writing, and dating. However, that all changed at the beginning of 2014, when I finally got to play a borrowed copy of Majora's Mask on N64. I put the game cartridge loaned to me by a classmate in my book bag, anxiously waiting for the school day to end so I could go home and finally play the game my younger self was dying to experience. I'm finally home, I put the game in my old dusty console, and this screen appears. Seeing this error message ruined my evening more than I'd like to admit, honestly, as I had been wanting to play Majora's Mask all day. Luckily, my mom was able to order an expansion pack off of eBay, and it arrived about a week later. One of the worst weeks ever, as each day I grew more and more anxious to experience the sequel to my beloved childhood classic. But finally, the expansion pack arrived, on a Friday no less, so I had the entire weekend to play. Immediately I was thrown off by the tone and setting as I watched Link in his familiar Ocarina of Time look wandering through a forest on Epona somberly. Going into this game so many years after Ocarina, it almost felt like a fever dream. I was also fascinated by the fact that a minor character like Skull Kid was becoming the main antagonist of this sequel, something I didn't expect going into it. Honestly, I wasn't sure what I expected going into this game. Even with the internet and having information about games more accessible, I just never really read or watched anything related to Majora. Majora's Mask felt so mysterious and bizarre. It almost didn't feel real. My journey through Majora's Mask actually got me back into gaming in general. I started keeping up with new game releases and built up a pretty solid collection of games after 2014 until the present day. But even after playing other games I missed out on during most of my teen years, I still couldn't get Majora's Mask out of my head. It definitely had the strongest impact out of every game I had ever played, and still does to this day. The atmosphere of Majora's Mask is unlike any other game I've ever played. It doesn't necessarily feel like a Zelda game either. I mean, we have our typical components from every Zelda game in Majora. The dungeons, a vast world to explore, things to collect, but it still doesn't quite feel the same. This is the first Zelda game that had a heavy focus on side quests, which adds to the game's unique personality. However, these side quests differ from side quests from other games. All of the side quests in Majora focus on world building, which is interesting considering the apocalyptic nature of the game's story. Yet this is the only game where I feel every single side quest truly complements the overarching theme of this game: existential dread. Existentialism is a philosophical concept that explores the true purpose of the individual in the world, as well as problems related to finding the purpose and the anxieties that go along with it. In existentialism, existence precedes essence, meaning that the individual creates meaning and value for themselves, and that without the creation of their own identity and value, they don't actually have any purpose at all without it. Existentialism promotes the idea that there is no meaning in this world, only those who live in it can create meaning for themselves. People are free to choose their own purpose, there is no purpose given to them. It's an interesting concept that is still debated heavily to this day, given the religious and psychological undertones. I find that this concept makes sense in the context of Majora's Mask's story. Each of the characters you encounter have their own goals and things they want to achieve. Anyu and Kafei want to get married, the mailman just wants to do his job perfectly, the Deku butler wants to find his son, and so many other characters have something that gives their lives meaning. But what about Link? What is the purpose of his journey through the Lost Woods and in the land of Termina? His initial purpose was to find his companion from Ocarina of Time, Navi, who left him at the end of the game. I like to think the masks represent Link trying to find a new purpose and find his true identity during this journey to find Navi. Link chose to do this to give himself a purpose after returning to childhood after what I would consider to be an extremely traumatic experience that took away his childhood innocence forever. Back to senior year of high school. We are on the cusp of graduation. Everyone has chosen their college, some have even chosen their major. Everyone has created a purpose for themselves based on their desires and interests. Unlike most of my friends, I chose not to go to college after high school and pursue a career in music. But deep down, I never really knew what I wanted to do with my life. Music was something that I was good at and made me feel deeply, but a few years after graduation, and after some traumatic experiences, I lost that purpose that I had given to myself. The metaphorical moon was hanging above my head. I was stuck in a cycle of trying to find a purpose for myself and pick up the pieces of my life. A cycle of trying on different masks in order to discover a new identity for myself based on a purpose. I was also stuck in a cycle of abuse at the hands of one of the most important people in my life, and I had nowhere to turn to. I had to metaphorically reset the clock, reset my purpose, and for about 6 years, I did just that, over and over and over. I finally resigned myself to the idea of going to college. I studied psychology, hoping it would lead me to greater things in life for myself, as an outlet for self-discovery and helping others in need. I got my first job. I worked so hard. No recognition. Then I got my second job, and for a while, I felt fulfilled in this new purpose. The purpose being to help others who couldn't help themselves. It was an extremely rewarding job, yet it still didn't feel right. I was still trapped in abuse at the time, feeling like a caged animal who could only find fulfillment in my job and nothing else. My hard work wasn't being recognized by management. I knew deep down that it didn't matter, as the people I helped appreciated me greatly, but it was still painful knowing that this purpose that I gave myself still wouldn't lead to anything in the long run. And then 2020 happened. This is an excerpt from a journal entry that I wrote at the beginning of 2022 when I was listening to the final hours music for Majora's Mask. This song captures the feeling of the last 2 years for me perfectly. This feeling like everything you know is collapsing in front of you, and you can't really do anything about it. The world is about to be destroyed by the most evil powers that we've seen in recent history. Watching a person you love dearly spiral further and further into madness until they are no longer the person that they used to be. The mental anguish that you know they feel inside, but you can do nothing about it. That in itself haunts your own mind, leaving you with a sense of guilt and dread as each day passes. You look within yourself to return to a time when things were stable, when things made sense. You look within to comfort your inner child, the person you were at the beginning of it all, before the unexpected shift that occurred over such a short period of time. Everything around you is crumbling or has ceased to exist, but the inner child remains, wondering where they are, what happened, and where they're going. It's unsettling, yet I feel a sense of peace. The feeling exists because the danger is gone for now. But in the final hours, whether it's the final hours of a civilization, relationship, or yourself, I can't help but let the sense of dread wash over me, over and over, so I am desensitized enough to carry on for one more day, even if it could be my last. It was after I escaped this cycle of abuse and lack of purpose after 2020 when I realized the true meaning of Majora's Mask and what Link was actually going through during the game. The residents of Termina and Link are creating purposes for themselves, but why? The answer to that question is the same for every character. They create purpose to avoid the dread of not having a purpose, the dread of feeling like their lives are meaningless, the dread of facing a corrupt world that looked so wonderful through the eyes of a child. With Link, he never really got to grow up in the same way other Hylians did. He had to grow up fast since he was the hero of time and had to save Hyrule. He had to witness the destruction and death in Hyrule Castletown, which once was a happy and bustling place with fun things to do and interesting people to interact with. Kokiri Forest, his home, is overrun with monsters. To his inner child, this didn't make any sense. How could such a wonderful place become a horrible one in a matter of a few years? How do I cope with all of this? This is the conclusion I came to. Link's journey after Ocarina of Time during Majora's Mask was about finding purpose in a fallen world, a world stuck in a cycle of corruption and evil, and to let go of his inner child in the process. Majora's Mask will always hold a lot of meaning in my life, as I could relate to the problems Link and the other characters face throughout the game. When I graduated from high school in 2014, like Link, I lost good friends that I never got to see again. Not because of anything bad, but because we moved on to different places or friend groups. Life felt so different, as I felt I had to grow up fast because of the trauma and abuse I went through, having to watch this person become more mentally unstable over time, and feeling like I was stuck in a cycle, trying to create meaning in my life that just didn't make sense anymore to me. For so many years, I thought my life would be one thing, and then everything changed. And many of the residents of Termina feel this way too, in my opinion, trying to find meaning in their lives that were doomed because of the moon that was about to crash down and end their existence within seconds. I felt the same way for so long. Everything I did was to create purpose to avoid the impending doom in my life, not knowing what day would be my last or when the abuse would lead to my death. But then, just like Link and the residents of Termina, I would finally reach the dawn of a new day.